Okay, well let's kick it off. So it is top of the hour. Thanks to everybody that stopped by. We are gonna focus today on what I consider the big three, which is really layouts, VCAs, and folders, and really try to expose you to a whole bunch of possible strategies for taking advantage of those. Now, obviously, depending on how long you've been using S4, S6, you may have, you may orient towards all layouts, or maybe just you've kind of gravitated towards VCAs from icon days, or maybe if you're newer, you've kind of incorporated just folders and gone really folder heavy, and that's fine. We're not really, don't want to impose my, my ideas in terms of this is the way you have to work. I think that's one of the beautiful things about these consoles is, there can be some complications in terms of, there's a lot of preferences, but because of that, you can suit it, you can set it up, you can dial it into the way you want to work. And so my goal here today is really to expose you to some ideas and you figure out what's best for you, right? We just want to make sure everybody really knows what's there, because there's been a lot of change over the past couple of years. And, maybe if you've been doing layouts mostly, there's some other ways to look at data and to kind of maybe represent your elements, your food groups in a better way. So that's really the goal. I'm gonna pivot as always into some other crazy topics. I do want to show maybe some multi-workstation, maybe some matrix. Certainly, if you have, as we start to dive in and ask questions, you can. Gil is here. Say thank you, Gil, and I think Robert Miller's here as well. So drop some stuff in the chat, and we'll ping off of things if we need to kind of, they can answer stuff directly, or we can, discuss if it's a larger topic we want to actually dig into, right? So with that, I'm going to encourage you to, if you have questions, please ask, but I'm going to jump in and we're going to get started. So I thought we'd start out with a little bit on just some basic layout stuff. And now along the journey here of the next hour, we're going to look at topics, but we're also going to look at preferences. And, it's a necessary thing to understand how to set this up, because that really determines your fate and how efficiently you can use the desk. Preferences are huge. So we're going to look at, I'm just reminding myself really for everything to look at preferences, because it's really important. So, okay. So first of all, just kick it off. I'm going to go to my Surface page here. We're going to look at some different configurations, because actually Gil and I were chatting, and I think it's really important to understand that you can have very different configs in terms of, hey, maybe the guy's got 8 faders, I've got 16, Gil has 24. Larger re-recording stages have a lot more faders. And so we want to talk about optimizing the settings and the workflow for what you have, not what I have, right? I think that's really important. So I have an S4, 16 faders, and then options bucket once again. And if you've been here before, you've seen that. But we're definitely going to try some different strategies whereby we orient or we tweak the settings to configure the spill zones and things differently. I want to try some different permutations. I think that'll be actually really good to understand. So that's what we have for a console. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to build a layout, and I'm going to try to take a couple different concepts into this at the same time. And this will kind of be our entry into working with layouts. Now, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go to the local options on the gear page here. And please understand that number of strips in layout that's 32. So that's virtual 32 containers on my 16 fader desk, right? So when I build a layout, I basically can do a full bank over so that I have 32 things, and that's completely up to you, right? You can set that to up to 256, but I'm just basically allocating containers for my layouts. In a layout, again, if you're not familiar, it's basically an exact location of a fader in a bucket with all the attributes, placed in that grouping. That could be from one workstation, multi-workstation, multiple apps. Like we'll actually start talking about matrix and things like that. Okay, so number of strips in layout is 32, and we'll start there. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do is one more thing I'm going to take advantage of that's important. I've also got this option here enabled that says double tap assign to copy tracks from banking mode into current layout. That's a total mouthful. But basically, it allows you to do some clever things, and I'm going to use it as a shortcut to kind of grab some things and throw them into a layout for our first kind of example. So that's what we're going to do. So to start this, what I want to do is I've got mostly on the desk right now, I have folders, basic folders, routing folders, and VCAs. That's really what I kind of have here. And we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. But to start, I'm just going to go and open up the folder that contains the effects returns, okay? And you're going to see, and I'm actually going to hide this window at one point in this workflow, and I'll explain why. But this proc right here, if I hold down attention and basically press the button that would normally be input, it's going to expose all the effects returns. And you can see there's basically dialogue effects, music, verbs and LFEs, things like that in there, right? So I just exposed that. So what I want to do now is on the tracks page. Now, if you're different workflow, you may want to just like look at auxes and say, hey, I just want to see the effects returns as opposed to folders or VCAs or all tracks. That's a great way if you're actually quickly building a layout and you want to do a filter so that you don't see a million things, you just see the kind of the food group or the type that you're trying to look for. In this layout, I want to basically throw effects returns into it in a relatively quick manner. So I'm going to use this, and I'm also going to take advantage of another kind of trick, if you will, which is scroll to track. And so actually I'm going to hide just for a very quick second, I'm actually going to hide the camera so that you can actually see the scroll to track come up. Now that's also quick. It's either a shortcut or a QWERTY function. But if you know, the naming convention, obviously naming conventions are really important, of your desk, you can start typing, hit enter, and I'm going to go back just so you can see the camera once again, and kind of sleight of hand. But essentially what it did is it, based on my banking preferences, and let's just show you that it's just very vanilla. It's left, right? My banking is very, very simple. You can see bank justification mode, left, spell left, right. They're all left. So it's very, very simple. It jumped all that stuff. It found that track and it stuck it right here at the first bank position. So now what I can do is I can double tap assign. And basically what that does, it's a quick hack, basically a way to dump all that into a layout in a really quick manner. And so, there's a couple extra things here that I have that I maybe don't want, but that's a really simple solve, right? I can get rid of those easily if I need to. But I just want to basically quickly store this. And so I can say store, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to type proc. Okay, and hit store. Okay. So let's close that up and let's just open it up and kind of show you how to restore that. So if I go to layouts, and we'll kind of show you some different ways to access this. You have lots of different ways to open and close and access and maneuver your layouts. So the first one, the most obvious one, is to press the layout button, and then to push, you're going to see one of the panels of the soft keys light up. I've said only use the upper left, and you can set that up as well. Under the settings, you get to pick kind of what you want for layouts, and you're going to find all of that information under layouts. Actually, it's under soft keys, but we're going to get into this in a second. You can basically determine, I've got left master module soft keys only. Okay, so that's what that is. That's why that's only in that quadrant. Just kind of wanted to set that up. So when I press that, it then brought back my my effects returns. Okay, so I could, if I wanted to, basically adjust the view as well. So now that that's loaded, I could just go into assign. We're going to go back into assign. It keeps kind of where I'm at. I'm going to go into the all switch, and I'm going to hit insert. And so what insert says is I want to see the signal chain view. For example, I've got essentially, effects, processing, reverb, subharmonics, and EQs, and maybe some EQs. I want to see that at the same time, and therefore I want that to be saved. So I'm just going to restore this kind of right over the top. Okay. So let me load a different layout real quick. And this one is basically like VCAs and food groups of folders. That's what this is. And then we'll go back in and we'll load our inserts. Okay, so that's a quick way to get effects returns. I can clean up some of the extra stuff that's in here, but I just wanted to show you a quick way to get most of what you wanted without having to do the whole kind of chiclet dance. I think that's a pretty cool thing. So a couple other things that are important here with regard to layouts. I'm going to and then we're going to kind of segue into some more ideas. You get to pick whether you want those to stay or to go. Right now it says, hey, bring it up. I'm going to say, great, I'm going to go back to that layout. Okay, take me back to Auto 1. So I got my global automation stuff there. That's, again, another preference in that same area. You can also do Shift a backslash here. That's handy because that is totally independent of the other, maybe you're in Shift 1, right, where you're looking at all the automation stuff, and you just want to quickly maybe jockey around some layouts. You can do Shift backslash. And then let me go back to my effects returns. Great, I got that. Okay, let's actually bring up a revive, which is here. And, we can control that, as you can see, okay? And then I want to go back to that split view where I had folders and VCAs, right? So that's another option, is to kind of, not necessarily take advantage of the standard way to access layouts, but use some of the soft key, the QuickJump stuff that's built into there. You can do Shift layout to close, or from here, you just repress the thing you'd pressed, right? That's all you got to do to get rid of that. Just repress what you press. Shift 0, as always, will get you out of the, not really out, but back to the default soft keys. The default soft keys is Auto 1, Auto 2, Session Management, and Extras, okay? So I know that particular example had a lot of kind of special stuff in it, but it's a great way to kind of kick off layouts. So that's kind of where I want to start. A layout is a collection of tracks spanning one or multiple workstations, as well as multiple applications. So it could be a mic pre, it could be a source or output from DADMAN matrix as well. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's the concept of a layout. Obviously, once you have them, you can move them around, you can drag them, you can delete them, you can reorder them. And that data, as always, I got to remind myself to talk about preferences because it's absolutely critical. That data is part of the auto load. So if I do Shift settings and I look at the auto load from titles and sessions, this is critical, right? This is really important. This says, what should I restore when this Pro Tools session opens or when you actually load a title? So this is incredibly important. And you can see within this, I've got a lot of granularity, but one of the things that's in here is layouts. Layouts and meters, so that's track layouts, and then that's essentially master meters, things like that. Is going to be brought back. And actually, we do tell you, if you're in the tracks page, there's a handy little tiny little thing here. You can see session data Pro Tools 21 Mac on HDX2. That's a cool little reminder that, I know where the data is coming from. The data coming from, again, if you go to the workstation page, this is really important. Make sure that your Pro Tools, whatever flavor of Pro Tools you're on, if you're on Pro Tools 2021, you have a blue star, because basically what that says is I've chosen Pro Tools 2021.7 as the app to save and collect all the XML data, and that is really important. Okay, so the blue star is there. Pro Tools is collecting the data. Shift settings. This is I should actually talk about preferences while we're in here. This is all really important. In general, you want all of this, right? You want post layouts, banking, track spills, all of that stuff. The only controversial preference I would hesitate to, I would caution you, let's just say, is user preferences. This one right here. Be careful with that, because you can imagine in early in your journey of working with S4, S6, you may have different ideas about how you want, the ballistics of the knobs to behave, and the auto, the click from DAW, all that stuff. It may have changed as your workflow changed. So what I would rather you do personally is on the user settings page, go to basically save, right? Save hey, this is Jeff's current working state. Put the date on there. So JJK 08 2021, whatever. Give it a specific file and save it, and that way you have a global, independent of the Pro Tools sessions. And then also, as a best practices, don't tick that box. I think that's not a great idea. One other tip that I would recommend, and it depends on your workflow again, but I'm obviously kind of all over the place. You can easily add a tiny little USB keyboard to your S4, S6 And if you're doing a lot of naming, obviously, I'm not sure how much you've dug into this, but you can actually, you can even name tracks from the home page as well. But if you're doing a lot of naming, it might be beneficial to actually have a little keyboard. And it's just hook one up via USB. It's very simple. I personally can't type very well on the touchscreen, so that's why I have it. And it's very simple to add somewhere into your config. Okay, so that's where we're starting. So the next thing I want to do, and I think we're doing pretty good, is get into folders, right? And get into structure and get into kind of how to control them and the concept of siblings and children and all of that thing, that kind of concept, okay? So, and we'll talk about some preferences. Obviously, preferences are huge, really important. So let's get into folders. And folders, I think, are huge. And Gil went through this. We went through this in a previous session, but if you have not played with them in the construct of S4, S6, you need to, because they're really important and really beneficial. And you should be able to see a little bit of my master meter, as well as some of the source meters, just the kind of the overview of the clips representing the different units within the food groups. And that's we'll dig into that in a little bit more detail and kind of show you some stuff. But let's actually look at, let me get rid of this goofy window here again. Of course, there's things that are in the way, isn't there? Yeah, that's fine. Get it over there. Okay, so we're looking at Pro Tools. We have this is just really a composite, kind of a Frankenstein session. It has post stuff in it. It has music stuff in it. It's really just to demonstrate the concept of the structures. That's really what it is. And you can see I've got folders for backgrounds and effects and things, but we're just going to really leverage this to talk about the structure. So the first thing we're going to do is let's just do some basic things. We already did an open close, right? So basically from the backgrounds, which is right here, I'm going to click from Pro Tools and just click on the folder, right? The equivalent of that from the strip is using attention input, right? The input basically changes to an open close, if you will. You see the BGs just expanded, right? And that exposed additional background subfolders is what that did. Okay, so that's the functionality on the desk, on the strip for open close. Let's expose more. So if you go on the top page here, if you go into extras, go to folder tracks, now you have kind of a whole control panel that is specific to folders. So we're going to stay on the BGs for a second. I'm going to hit attention. I don't have auto spill on right now. We're going to explain that. That's a whole nother kind of path, if you will. But this operates on the attention track. So if I toggle folder, which is the top one, it's going to do just what we did when we click on the little folder icon in Pro Tools. It's a simple toggle, okay? BGs is attention. Now, the other two kind of important nomenclature are children and siblings. So children is anybody that is nested under the folder that you're clicking on, right? There could be a lot of nests. It really depends on how you structure things. Siblings are everybody, next door. So if you look at my session, music, backgrounds, effects, crowd, Foley, those are all siblings, right? So if backgrounds is on the top level and I say, toggle siblings, it's going to basically open up that first level of everybody that are neighbors. So let's just try it. Let's do a toggle siblings. And basically now it made things a lot more interesting, if you will. And we'll just do a quick little scroll around so you can see, there's really a lot more going on here. We'll toggle siblings off one more time. And we'll go back where we were. And we're still attentioned on backgrounds. Let's do a toggle on children. Now, children is specifically under the folder that you're on. So just think about, expanding the nest of that track. So we're going to toggle children. And basically now we're digging into backgrounds, right? So it said, okay, backgrounds contains BGA. BGA is a folder. We're going to get into the structure as well. There's VCAs for control. And then there's backgrounds B, right? Another subfolder, which has got stuff in it. And then there's background C, right? And you can obviously go as deep and as crazy as you want. But that specifically expanded everything specific to backgrounds, if that makes sense. Okay, so that was basically children, toggle children. Okay, now take it one step further. And again, this is all about showing you the functionality. You can leverage it in whatever way it makes sense for you. I'm going to go into the soft keys. I like to customize things. I think it's very really, it's just, there's a whole bucket of possibilities. You create preferences, you create precedents to the things you're doing all the time. So as a result, I like to kind of reprogram the LOC, the loc switch sometimes. So what you could do is you could actually leverage that, toggle child folders or toggle sibling folders or toggle folder, whatever makes sense to you on the loc switch. So right now, if I just press this, right, I can dig into BGs. Expand that collapse set. I can go to music. I can dig into music. And so this is just basically either, in this case, it's toggling child folders, but you could also shift and do another layer and do siblings. You could do, just toggle folder. It's really completely depends on how you want to leverage it, but it's really, again, exposing you to some ideas of workflow and how to take advantage of what's there. So one last thing, and this is not my favorite way to operate, but I need to show it so you understand what it does. Let's go to the backgrounds on the touchscreen. This, it takes advantage of this. The reason I don't prefer this is it takes another finger to do this. You have to do shift and then open and then touch BGs. And then that'll expand that, as you can see, right? We've just expanded background. So that's not my preferred way to do it, but it certainly does work. And then once you're done with the open close functionality on the touch screen, you would go back to attention, and then it's going to flip the RISM, the record input solo me, back. Okay. So as you can see, you can touch screen, you can do the open close, the management on the strip. You can leverage soft keys, you can customize soft keys. And then obviously, there's no reason why you can't, click in Pro Tools if you need to. Perfectly viable and perfectly fine at any given point, but want to kind of expose you to, some of the controls that exist, right, with regard to folders. And folders are really, really powerful. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to keep going unless there's any pertinent, relevant questions. We looked at effects returns. We built a quick layout with effects returns, but I want to start to get into, hey, why folders, why layouts, why VCAs, right? I think that's really cool, really powerful. On the top level, and if we just kind of scroll down, you can actually see them right now. There's a bunch of food groups, as we said, music and backgrounds and effects in folders. Some of them are routing folders, some of them are basic folders. That is denoted on the display modules. A routing folder on the display module obviously has processing, right? Because that's one of the benefits of that is EQ and harmonics and dynamics. And then the clip overview, and then there's actually a down arrow like an aux to say, hey, I am a routing folder, which is pretty handy. And then obviously there's routing, right? A basic folder is going to be like process or print. These are at negative infinity, right? There's no signal flow, but it's a structural thing. And that's what that shows. And then you have some, you have a little visual on the OLED. But what I wanted to get at is multiple ways to look at the same thing. I think this is really important. On the top level, I'm not in a layout. I have a vsubs all, okay? And just to back up real quick, we're going to go into settings, we're going to go to surface. So right now, the way we have it configured, we have a simple left zone, right zone. And you can see on the surface configuration, spill left, spill right. Super simple. For this size console, it's really the default way to configure this, right? I have a vsubs all. What is that? Well, it's basically the idea that, hey, wouldn't it be nice to just quickly be able to get to your subharmonic, right? Your boom returns, if you will, right? And so what I can do is I can basically spill. I'm going to use menu spill zone right. That's one way to do it. I'm going to spill it into the right side. And we're going to go and grab a pro subharmonic. So I'm going to choose, hey, let's go to music. So I'm going to hit focus. Focus, again, is an S4 specific function. And then I'm going to push into the BX that's on there, okay? So your overall subharmonic, and then you have the individual frequency bands that are here. And if I want to be super clever, I can also create a map and bring it down. We talked about maps, and we can get into more on that, but you've got all that goodness in the mix and everything. So now I'm controlling my boom, my subharmonic really quickly, right, for music, right? That's what I just got to. And okay. So, well, how is that different from that layout or from another folder or from whatever? Well, I just want to kind of compare contrast this because I think it's really important. So while you're in this spill zone, your user 1-2 functions are specific. That's your banking. That's independent to this spill zone. So over here on the left side, I can always move around independent of that. That's why it's really nice to have spill zones. Well, let's dig into proc. And proc is my processing folder. I'm just going to say, hey, let me see what's in there. And it's all of the effects returns. Now, depending on who you talk to, you might want to put all your dialogue, verbs into kind of nested under your dialogue, food group folder. That's totally up to you. All of my stuff is accessible in a basic folder on the top level. You get to pick and figure out the way that makes sense for you. I'm just going to kind of expose you to a couple different ways, but you can see I've got, dialogue verb, ABC, and then sub, and then music verbs, and then sub, and then there's an up mix, and then effects verbs and sub, right? So it's just all of the different kind of food groups, effects returns. But in that same cluster, as you can see, are the sub, the pro sub harmonics, right? So they're already in there. But I'm also leveraging the idea that, hey, maybe I just want to quickly get to all of those specific types of processors. And that's what I'm doing with the VCA, right? You could say, hey, quickly get to the verbs, quickly get to just the delays, quickly get to just the up mixes. And that's one possible technique by leveraging a VCA, independent of the whole group of effects. Okay, that makes sense. So that's part of the idea of actually having VCAs. Now, obviously, VCAs are great for gain staging, right? They're you can trim, you can coalesce, you can affect the level of the elements that are flowing into a routing folder. That's huge. That's very crucial. But they can also be used to quickly get to a subset of elements that are somewhere else in your structure. Okay, I think that's really useful. Okay, cool. What's next? I want to show, and actually, while we're in this, okay, let's look at food groups, because this is really where it gets really, I think, powerful. How are we doing on time? I'm sure I have way too many things to discuss, but we'll go through what we can. So let me close the plugin window real quick here from the system stuff. And we're basically collapsed, right? And again, you could just you could leverage the pick any one of your food group folders, and just do a close siblings, and shoot, you're gone, right? Everything is kind of flat. That's kind of a nice feature with that. So what I want to do is just show some structure and show the benefit of the structure, right? And this is really all about folders, specifically routing folders in this case, but also within that, taking advantage of basic folders. Again, I have a whole bunch of things in here, and it's just applicable to music, applicable to post. Let's take advantage of effects. So I'm going to, on the left side here, we're not doing any auto spill yet, but I'm going to say the effects routing folder, which is right here. Okay, I'm going to spill that into the right side. So let's just do that. Let's just move that over here. Now, if you press the menu switch on any VCA or folder, you're going to get basically a grid of options that says either spill to the discrete left zone, spill to the discrete right zone, or spill in place left or right. And that's kind of the granularity. We're going to look at another example in a second where I change the spill zones and we look at one contiguous zone, which I think is also viable depending on your console size and how many units you have in a bucket. The downside of this is my container is only 8, right? So if I've got, 24 things, 24, backgrounds or dialogue or strings, it's kind of a drag because I'm basically having to navigate in this little bucket, right? So, but the structure is great. The structure is excellent. So within the effects routing folder, I dove into all the different subfolders: AFX, BFX, CFX, DFX, EFX. Now, let's just go into B. We're going to dive one level deeper, and we now have the ability to specifically, I'm going to attention B1, 2. Obviously, it's going to light up the center section, and I could then take advantage of EQ or Dyn, or panning or whatever I need to do. Let's get rid of those plugins real quick. So I'm specifically addressing one track, and I'm lighting up the attention zones. Now, depending on what I want to do on this track, I might want to take advantage of, and we talked about this a little bit previously, attention presets. So if I want to maybe see a chain view plus EQ, that would be handy. I would go into my attention presets and change that. And so what that's going to do is, depending on what I have, depending on my particular view, I might see, chain of inserts plus sends, or EQ, Dyn, you saw panning, whatever I need to see, I just basically changed what the center section, the attention section is looking at. So now I can say, you know what? I really need to access that multiband that's on this track. Boom. Now I'm in and I'm accessing the multiband compressor that's on that, right? So there's those individual bands. If I need to take advantage of expand faders, I can do that. But that's a quick way, leveraging attention presets, to change kind of all the information in the heads-up display for the attention track. I'm going to go back to the first preset, which is just its default. It's very vanilla EQ dyne, right? That's kind of what I'm doing. You're doing all day, surround panning, all that kind of thing. Okay, so you're now in the effects B folder. You're controlling B. You're automating your mixing. You're dialing that in. It's handy to also have group control, right? So that's what these little, at the top of every folder is a VCA for, obviously, for gain, staging, for automation, for control of all of the elements contained within that. So that's one technique that people take advantage of. And so if I jump back up the tree by pressing menu, I'm now in A through E. Let's go into B. Let's go into A. Okay. And I've got, basically we'll attention A1, 2. I've got group control there. Okay. So that is the structure, right? We'll go back up. One thing that's also very cool, very powerful, and I'm just gonna close this real quick. We're gonna go to the settings, and we're gonna go to the top of the preferences. There's an option here that's really handy that basically says synchronize folder state with spill. Well, what is that all about? Well, basically it says, hey, if I spill in to effects, expand that on the desk, expand that in Pro Tools, and if I come back out, basically resolve that. So that's what that's doing. It's tracking kind of what I'm doing. And then it will obviously expose, if we just go into effects, it expands effects. If we come out of that spill zone, it should restore that view, depending on how it's doing. Okay. So that's kind of the concept of that. Okay. So obviously the other huge part beyond the structure of all the kind of the food groups and then the elements that are nested within there is the power of being able to route and process, right? So if let's go back into BFX. So we're going to go back into effects, go back into BFX, and I'm going to I went one level too deep. I'm going to attention on BFX, which is a routing folder. Okay. And now I'm processing, I'm EQing on a multi-channel channel strip living on BFX, the routing folder. And I'm processing, or in this case, filtering, band limiting the entire bucket of elements, right? Which is super powerful. And then if I want to, dive in further, now I'm actually processing or mixing on the individual elements that are in that folder, right? So that is the huge power of that concept of the routing folder, is being able to process the units, but also process the whole group of elements. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's jump back out of here and let's get out of that, come back to that, and let's move forward. I want to show a little bit of, let's do this. Let's actually pivot into layouts a little bit and show layouts in conjunction with VCAs and folders. Again, there's huge benefit to taking advantage of folders. And part of that is because obviously Pro Tools natively has a folder structure. Anybody that's working or editing or doing anything without a Surface has that structure. If you have an S1, a couple of S1s, an Avid Control, a dock, you still have workflows with regard to spill and jumping in and out of folders. And that's great. And that just comes over automatically without doing any work on S4, S6. So what I want to show now is I want to show kind of an aggregate of layouts and folders and VCAs. Okay. So we're going to go back to, I'm going to press the layout button, and we're also going to go into Shift /. And so, actually, it's a /, isn't it? And basically, I'm going to bring up a layout that I created previously that just loads up kind of a starting place, if you will, right? The concept being, if I can spill from this, I can jump. It's a jumping off point. That's kind of how I see it. But this is what I come back to. That's kind of the idea. So excuse me, I have VCAs over here, I have food groups over here. So if we want to go back to effects, we can jump into effects, we can jump back into BFX, we can go back to B1, 2. And we've got everything we just talked about right now, right? That's what that's doing. If we want to go back into music, that brought up a bunch of subfolders, go into orchestra, right? And go into orchestra 1. Okay, so you're navigating all of that from the layout. You're jumping off from the layout, but when you spill back out, it's going to take you back to a known place, if that makes sense, right? That's what the layout is 1-to-1. And I've got as many pages as I saved, and I said, what did I say? There was 32 virtual slots. It's totally up to you how many pages you want there to be. But on the second page, I have, I can open up, this is my stream folder, which has got stuff for Zoom and for routing, things like that. And then you've got, tones, 2-pops, master, submasters, chains, whatever, any of those types of categories of things you need access to quickly, you can get to, okay? So again, that structure of folders, instead of just doing a spill, so here, let's just do an a different view of the same thing, right? I'm going to do a right spill track type folder. What did that do? Well, it gave me the stuff in the order of the session. So my Zoom stream, my masters, my tones, dialogue, blah, blah, blah. The first 3 things are the things I really don't care that much about right now, right? And that's just the order of the session. So that's another reason why it might behoove you to leverage kind of building a starting place, to have some of this. Well, here's the things I really care about first, dialogue, music, backgrounds, etc. And then if I need to get to other stuff, it's on another page and it's still kind of contained there. So you're really creating a view into how many and which types of folders, VCAs, specific tracks you want in what exact places you want. That's what this idea is. Over here, we talked about this. This is the same idea of, quickly get to my masters, Foley master, background master, music master, by leveraging a VCA. Yes, those can be accessed from another way in a folder, but that's a quick way to get to them, just like we got to the subharmonic controls, right, which are part of the whole effects returns, or all of the processing, right, which is also there. Okay, so that's one concept. I want to mention a couple brief preferences. How are we doing here? We're doing good. With regard to layouts, that definitely comes up. And one of those is the banking preference. So this is probably worth mentioning. Right now I have, and this is just the way, again, you can do whatever you want. I have my layouts set to reset bank position to home. And what that means is basically, let's open the layout. Let's just start from nothing. And I'm going to go back, access it, and say, hey, I want to actually work on what was on the stream. I was doing something on the stream. Great. Okay, cool. And then I jump off and let's say I want to look at another thing. Maybe it's the, feet, Foley, whatever. Okay. And then I close my layouts. When I go back in, I really want that starting place of that first layout personally. So if I press this, it says, hey, I know you were looking at the stream, but I'm going to just re-justify back to 0. And that's what I've got mine set to, right? You can have it remember the page you were on or not. And there's actually a lot of granularity in there that you can do. But check it out. If I page over, okay, now I'm on the second page of that layout, if that makes sense, right? I told it when you recall that layout back, 0 the bank. And so it takes me where I know it at a known starting place. I think that's really a nice pref. But you can dial in whatever makes sense for the way you want to work. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's see. I want to look at a couple things with regard to navigation. Now, this is not strictly folders or VCAs, but it is kind of slick and handy. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's do this. Let's actually change our configuration because I wanted to do this. I think this is important. Right now, kind of the intuitive, logical way I would set this particular desk up is spill zone left, spill zone right. Let's throw that out the window. Let's actually go into settings and surface. One kind of caveat, one disclaimer, if you will, you're really not supposed to, when you have workstations attached to your desk, you're really not supposed to reconfigure it. So I'm going to just caution, don't do this, but I'm going to do it. So we're going to go into the surface and I am going to actually go and say config left spill. I'm going to clear the spill, and I'm going to actually clear both spills. We're going to rebuild a new giant spill, and we're going to change the workflow, if you will. Okay, so we're going to go to right spill, and we're going to rejigger this to be one giant bucket. Okay, I'll show you why in a second. Now, that has no bearing at all on the layout, on the one-to-one layout, right? So if I go layouts and I go my kind of split thing, it is identical, right? There's VCAs, process, food groups, page 2. It does not change that at all because that is explicitly a one-to-one kind of thing, if you will. What it does change is I have less containers to put things. So now I have to think about like diving into a contiguous tree or a folder, right? But the upside of that is a couple things. When I actually jump into backgrounds or effects, I have 16 contiguous, which is great. I don't have the luxury of what Gil has, a 24 fader desk, where he can do a little bucket of VCAs or folders and then spill into 16. I don't have that. So I'm trying to kind of leverage some different ideas here. So basically what I could do now is, let's just jump back into effects. I'm going to go, we're going to look at our, and actually, did I do? Yeah, I guess I declared this as the right zone. You just have to know which zone you declare it as. Is it left or right? I guess I said right. So let's go into VFX. Okay, so check it out. Now, when I jump in, I have 16 contiguous things, which is great. Obviously, if you're working on a bunch of elements at once and you want to have control over those, that is very, very handy to have that. Now, what you're doing now is you're navigating the whole tree in one big chunk, okay? And there are some techniques, some ideas that you can leverage to take advantage of that. So normally, one of the things that we talked about was like leveraging, okay, spill the effects returns into a bucket, spill the chains or the masters into a bucket. Well, there's other things you can do to kind of get around that. We'll talk about that in a second here. So I'm going to press menu to jump back out. Now every kind of level is flat, if you will. I'm going to press again, and I'm back to, you see it's lit up blue, I'm back to my layout, okay? That's what it brought me back to. So I've got only one spill zone now. Let's try something though here. On my layout, I've actually got a processing folder, which is a basic folder you can see right here. I'm going to take advantage of lock. We're going to try something clever here. And I'm actually going to lock that. It'll show a little lock folder on the display module. So now, regardless of whether I'm in banking, regardless of whether I am in layouts, it doesn't matter what view you're on. It actually doesn't even matter what workstation you're on, believe it or not. I can actually go over to another workstation. Which has got, let's see. Yeah, so this particular workstation is basically like a stem recorder. It still has process here, right? So the all switch works for, well, the lock state focuses on, it kind of penetrates all layers, and then the all switch will kind of change the view of all workstations. So the point of this is, what is the point of this? The point of this is I can actually preserve something, keep it there, right? Let's go back to our layout just for a second, which got me started on effects. I'm going to go back into BFX, okay? And we're going to go jump into effects, and we're going to go into BFX. And we're just diving down into our one zone that exists, right? Now, and I'm working on, maybe some of these guys, 13, 14 over here. What I can do is I can actually take advantage of that locked thing that I just kind of threw there. And that's a processing folder where I can just kind of spill in place and expose, maybe the effects LFE is what I want. Maybe I'm sending to, let's just go into sends here real quick. So you can see this. Okay, so we're looking at sends, and we're sending to a boom on one of the B effects, right? And I just kind of temporarily within this lock structure said, hey, I want to look at the effects sub, right? And so let's just do this really simply. Just basically push in to the pro sub, and it is it's right here, right? So now we're controlling pro sub, and we have access to the send that's going into it. I'm not sure what's here. Let's just go forward in time and see if there's something here. It doesn't really matter, but you get the idea, right? So that's a quick kind of the concept of being able to take advantage of a locked structure and get to it, and that's kind of a temporary It's kind of a temporary thing, right? So when I press menu, I'm back to that contiguous chunk of 16 things that is I'm spilled into, right? I can give this away at any point. I can unlock it and say, hey, go away. Now I'm back to my contiguous channels, and I'm back out, and I'm back out. Okay. So different ways of navigating, different ways of orienting. Let's fold in a little bit of auto spill while we're having the conversation and talk about this a little bit, how we're doing. We're doing pretty good on time.
Hey, Jeff,
yeah.
right after this, Eric's got something he wants to talk about that's specific to a workflow his, and but I think the auto spill is a good thing to show. So let's do that first, and then we'll get to the question.
Okay, sounds good. So let's just do auto spill real quick. Now you have granularity and obviously you have more granularity if you do declare a left and a right zone. You have that benefit. Right now I only have one zone, and that's totally my choice. But you can explicitly determine if you want VCAs and folders to auto spill, and if you do have them auto spill, where do they go? Do they go to the left? Do they go to the right? So those are all options, and they're right here. It's right, automatic spill of attention VCA. Let's start with just folders, and we'll send them specifically to the spill zone right. So I'm saying when I attention a folder, I want you to take it into the right bucket. Okay, so let's just get out of that and take a quick look. And so now what that says is, if I press attention on effects, it should automatically spill into my only zone, which is what I have to find right now. If I go attention B effects, it auto spills in, right? If I attention B15, 16, it's attentioned. I'm now operating on that particular track, okay? So that's what auto spill does. And again, you can send it into discrete zones. You can have it be different, whether it's a folder or a VCA, completely up to you. But that's kind of the start of that conversation. And the preferences are critical based on how you set up your desk. Let's go back real quick to our previous configuration, and then we'll get into his question. But I just want to show you kind of the different options, right? Because I think it's really important. So we're going to go back into config and clear. I'm going to tell you don't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because you can confuse the desk while you are right spill clear. While you have workstations attached, it's really not best practices to reconfigure anything on the desk. So I'm just going to disclaim that, if you will. So, okay. So I'm just going to rebuild the desk and then show you, obviously, the benefits of having multiple zones is really powerful, even though the containers are smaller, right? You have to find the path forward that works for you, but there's huge benefits, obviously, to having more containers. I'm going to go back to my starting layout, which is, again, the concept of starting place, right? I'm going to bring processing over here. I'm going to bring, and I don't even have to do that. I can do the one button press, right? I can do the attention, which goes here now, right? Does that make sense? So it can be super fast. I'm leveraging auto spill on the right side. It says, hey, folders are auto spilling into the right. I attention effects. I attention B effects. I'm back, and now I found B34, and I'm working on that. Meanwhile, that pro sub that I was looking for is over here, and I'm going to push into it, and I'm going to expand and get into. Yeah, there we go. There's a music. That's for the music sub, but you get the idea, right? So I've roped off all of those effects returns, verbs, up mixes, whatever you need over here. I've taken advantage of customized expand faders. That's great. And pop back out. That spill zone is populated. I get rid of it by pressing menu, and then the structure we talked about with auto spill. So let's take Eric's question.
Yeah, so Eric, if you want to go ahead and ask and kind of explain what you're wanting to do.
Cool. Thanks for this. You know what? I think what you've been explaining has kind of snapped something in a good way.
Cool. Good.
I've had I'm running a 24 track S6, and I've got 1 through 24 all in line and the MTM off to the right. So that's my configuration. And I'm trying to apply D command and S1 workflows into the S6, which after your talk today, I know is probably not what I should be doing. And let me explain the way I normally work is 17 through 24 will be my VCAs. Let's say I've got dialogue and music VCAs, 17 through 24, and then 1 through 16 would be the source tracks. Or then I would go 17 to 24 would be sound effects, BGs, Foley. 1 through 16 would be the source tracks. So I'm trying to apply that logic to S6. And I think the best way for me to do it now, based on what you've been explaining, is keep that workflow. Either keep 17 through 24 as VCAs or folder tracks, but then have it be all my VCAs and folder tracks, have it be dialogue, music, effects returns, sound effects, beat everything in there. And then what I need to do, just spill those into 1 through 16. Correct?
Yeah, that's a great, and I know Gil can probably talk to that as well. It's a very popular workflow, having a 16 fader bucket of the units or the elements that you're working on, and then basically the folders or VCAs are coming from an 8 fader chunk. And that's kind of what I've got here on that in that layout. But if it was just in the spill zone, same difference, I can instantly get to, and in my case, I've got less space, but you're going to get 16 structures, right, that you can dive into. In your case, on the left side, I think that's absolutely the best way to go.
And because what I would do normally on D command is I would just leverage kind of memory locations and hidden tracks. So if I want to get to my sound effects, it's going to hide everything out. It's going to hide dialogue and music and all that. It'll just going to show sound effects. And
I think when you start leveraging folders, though, you're naturally, kind of exposing just a certain food group. So it's like you don't need show hides.
Exactly. And so it's like as you were concluding, I was starting to get really excited. I got to log off and try this now. I got to log off. So so I think it's going to be a cool thing once I get the muscle memory on the buttons and how to quickly access stuff. I think it's going to be really cool. So I was excited when you posted this on the Duck to talk about this, because this is exactly the kind of workflows I've been struggling to get used to.
Yeah. So one thing I would kind of exactly what Jeff was just talking about right before this, and using 2 different zones. The way I kind of work is I've got 16 faders, my master module, and then I've got another 8 faders that I kind of use as my right 8 fader zone that I look at track type. So for me, instead of trying to specifically put things in there, I'm mostly now using folders kind of as my navigational kind of hierarchy. And I would put folder track types over in that right zone, and then basically set my preferences up. So when I attention, it automatically spills the contents over onto the left side. I mean, and your system, you're basically have got all 24 faders contiguous, but the same type of workflow. And what's really great about that workflow, in my opinion, versus what you were talking about before with the track show hides, is with track show hides, if you do ever need to add something to that, then now you're having to mess with those.
Totally. And I was trying to figure out, well, how do I update a layout if this track is hidden?
And that's why you use track types. And so any folder that you put in, or you put stuff into a folder that's new or whatever, the system doesn't matter at that point. It's always going to spill what's inside of there at that point. And so it updates itself automatically, and you don't have to do as much housekeeping to make sure that everything stays kind of in sync with one another inside the session.
And so this is going to be another S6 101 question, and I might be just answering my own question. But so for the folder tracks, I'd make that my right spill zone, 8-track spill zone, and for everything else, the source tracks would be a 16-track spill zone to the left.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yep. You just define that in the surface page.
Yep.
And absolutely.
Sweet.
It's one of those things that once you get used to that type of workflow, I mean, I've been using, go back to D command, D control back in the day. I mean, I used VCAs to do a lot of navigation.
Yep.
And that was a great workflow. But now with folders, with the processing that you can do with routing folders and the nesting and everything, having all of that with these track types and your spill zones on an S6, S4, it just takes it to a whole other place. That, like I said, it's one of those things where it's kind of, you set the thing up, and as your session migrates and changes depending on what the project is at the time, it makes it very easy to just have things work the way you want them.
Yeah.
Instead of having to actually always be fiddling with either memory locators or a layout here and doing this, that, and the other. It just all kind of flows together and just lets you work. And once, like you said, once you get that muscle memory down, it just becomes such a fast workflow that it's almost hard to keep up with the desk at that point.
Yeah. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. So
no, thank you so much. Like I said, it just clicked when you were going through your steps. So this was super helpful.
Awesome. I'll add, I have, can you guys hear me? I have 16 fader S6, and I do exactly the same workflow. And I mean, it's rare that I have anything more than 16 elements just for the type of work that I usually do in a group. And if I do, I'll make a subfolders. But with that spill from folders in from the right side to the left side is just brilliant. And like if I have more than 8, I'll just bank. I'll just hit the chiclet on the bottom there and bank over. So it works great, to be honest with you. It's so fast to navigate.
Awesome. Okay. One last thing I want to show because it's kind of fun. So what I want to do is I've got 2 workstations hooked up. I want to show a little bit of matrix stuff real quick, and it'll be super quick, actually. So I'm going to go back to my default view on soft keys. I'm going to get out of the layout, okay? And we're just kind of back to here. I'm going to hit the bank home. If we're not already banked home, there's a bank home switch. Okay. I'm going to do something. I'm actually going to go over to the second workstation just for a second. And that just flipped over to that, which is like a source recorder rig. And I'll show you that in a second. And in there's actually a folder. I'm actually just going to, let's see, there's a record folder. Yeah, I'm going to lock this for a second real quick here. And I'm going to go back to the first rig. Okay. So what I'm doing is there's 2 workstations, right? There's my primary HDX2 and there's a recorder. And we're flipping between them, right? And if you had KVM like IHSE or Think Logical, you could do fun stuff with that as well. But right now I'm just basically jumping back and forth. But I actually kind of intentionally threw a folder from the other rig onto this desk and locked it because I wanted to show you something kind of fun. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to change a couple different things at once. We're going to go back into that shift / where you get to layouts, and we're going to bring up some different meters. And now what we're looking at is basically the speaker outputs of the RMU, re-renders of different flavors, 7.1, 5.1, and then the binaural also, right? So that's stuff coming from Matrix, part of the monitor profile that I can get to, instantly from a meter layout, right? That's also part of that session data stuff. Pretty cool. So that's cool. Now here, what I want to do is I want to expose the tracks from the recorder. So I'm going to spill the recorder tracks that are basically feeding into the recorder. And so we should actually see if these are input, we should see these. And if I'm going to go shift zoom vertical, and we're going to change the display module views to see meter and waveform. And that should allow us now to see multi-channel. These are actually 712 inputs to these print tracks that are coming off of this recorder. So the recorder folder is a basic folder. Inside of it, there's just basically, I just made some stem, tracks for dialogue, music, and effects. They're 712. They're being fed from Matrix. They're on a separate rig, and since it's locked, I'm able to view this. We'll do the attention input once again. I'm able to see this on the same layer, if you will, right? So that's kind of the idea, which I think is kind of interesting. And actually, let's go back to our primary rig. So we are back on our primary rig. I can collapse the folder, and I can still see that. So one other thing I wanted to show really quick, we have 1 minute, is basically the signal flow. And I'm going to hit play, and I'm actually going to go into, I have too many things on my screen, don't I? Let me actually hide the desk for 1 second. So this is in Dadman, which is controlling our matrix. I'm going to flip over to that other machine real quick, and you can see the inputs coming into those tracks, right? Just to kind of show the signal flow. It's on another rig. It's actually playing in sync. I could certainly use satellite link or do any of that kind of thing, but I just kind of wanted to show that briefly. And then one other kind of crazy thing I'm doing here, I just want to show really quickly, is I have on meter paths, I have 10 channel Dante, Digilink, and Matty meters. And what does that mean? Well, basically it's automatically sending the whatever source is being monitored out 3 different ways simultaneously, right? So for example, if we flip over to, this is a 712 sound effect, which is being played back Dante, right? It's DVS essentially. You can see that right here, 712. Now, if that is the source that's active, back over in Pro Tools, I've got an ingest track. That is actually what's being sent over, right? I'm literally ingesting that source, right? So let's change it. Let's actually go and just turn on the binaural and go back over here, right? So that's now what's feeding. That stream is actually Digilink, but there's parallel Matty and Dante. But the point of this is pretty cool because you can actually create this crazy parallel feeds that can go to different workstations, just either to monitor or listen. I mean, you could re-record it. It's all pre-fader, so it should be exactly the same signal. But it's very, very powerful and clever. And you also have the ability to meter everything, as we were looking at, directly in Pro Tools and directly on our S6, S4 from one or multiple systems on the desk at the same time, right? So the layout, or in this case, the locked tracks from another workstation, that allows us to quickly, I'm going to unlock this, and that's going to free up, those tracks. Now the tracks from the second workstation are gone, right? Unless I actually go and target that workstation, which would be right here. Workstation 2, workstation 1, okay? So tremendous power in the system, but like anything, it's finding your path, right? It's taking advantage of the preferences, trying the orientation of how am I going to use folders, how am I going to use VCAs, how am I going to use layouts, and they all have value. It's really about your use case and how to kind of fold all that stuff together. So, any last questions before we wrap up?
If I can ask a completely non-related topic question.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Is there a way on the soft keys, can you customize each window, or is it only the top 2?
You mean the panels on these windows you're talking about?
Can you customize what shows up in each window other than the top 2?
Yeah, you can customize everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So
well, and even beyond that, you can customize the buttons around the encoders. You can customize the numeric keypad. You can customize, I mean, everything down.
Yeah. If you go to the page here, this basically shows, right? So those are master module soft keys, right? Those are automation. Oh, and you're not actually seeing sorry. Go to my VNC so you can see this. So these are master modules, specifically soft keys, and you just touch one, right?
Yeah.
And you access a function, and then you customize it. These are, transport functions specifically. There's the numeric section, the locate function section. There's the wheel section, and then on all of those, they all have multiple layers. Okay. So yes,
I guess I just didn't dig deep because I have the top 2 customized to what some custom-made macros and soft keys. I was just wondering if you could do the bottom 2, but I guess you can.
You can do it. You can do everything, and then highly recommend, once you do some of that work, basically go and hit export.
Yeah.
And say, Jeff, name, date. Sometimes we have obviously different facilities with different operators. This is Bob, this date, this show, whatever. Boom, Bob soft keys. instant access, and then you got all that back.
Awesome.
And something else I would say when if you're changing any of the preferences or any of these soft keys, especially if you're working with it in a facility with other people, I mean, it's hard to know sometimes, you know, if whatever was there was saved by somebody or anything.
Right.
Best thing to do before you change anything is basically save it kind of as that day's default, and then you can go about changing everything. So at least you can always get back to what was at there at the start of the day, just in case somebody else didn't save their stuff. It takes all of 10 seconds and can definitely save somebody else's day and losing all their stuff at some point and having to come back in and try to figure out how to figure it.
Yeah, exactly. You sit down and it's completely foreign to you, right? You can do a factory, takes it back to the factory state. You hit import, you find your set, you open it, everything should be back to exactly the last time you left it on the desk. And so, yes, definitely save XMLs of soft keys, your soft keys, and your user preferences as well. Those two things are critical. So absolutely, that's very important.
Cool. Thanks so much. This was really, really super great today.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. And we will see you next time.